Hello friends, Kishan is here again and welcome you in this video tutorial. In this video tutorial, we are going to look into Spring MVC Exception Handling. Spring MVC Exception Handling is very important to make sure you are not sending server exceptions to the client. Today we will look into Spring Exception Handling using @exception handler, @controller advice and handler exception resolver. Any web application requires good design for exception handling because we don't want to serve container generated page when any unhandled exception is thrown by the application. Spring is having a well-defined exception handling approach is a huge plus point for any web application framework. That is being said, Spring MVC framework delivers well when it comes to the exception and error handling in our web application. A Spring MVC framework provides 3 ways to help us achieving robust exception handling. First approach, we can define a exception handler method in the controller class itself within the controller, and that exception handler method is accessible for that controller class only. So, and second approach is the global exception handler. Rather than defining the exception handler method within the controller class, we can define a separate class and that is global for all controllers. And finally, we will look into how to handle exception using handler exception resolver. So in this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to handle exception using exception handler method within the controller. Okay, so this is the project which I had created in my previous video tutorial, and there I have shown in how to implement I18N or Spring internationalization. Here I have created a separate project is called Spring MVC Exception Handling, and all files I have copied from this project only. So if you could have watched my previous video tutorial, then you can understand what is this project actually. So let me run this project first of all. Now click on the finish. Now project is deployed on the server, and this is the page which is getting forwarded to the client. If I can open this project on the Chrome, then you can see this is the student registration form, and here you have a provision to submit your information in either in English or French language. So that up to you. By default that is getting displayed in the English language. If you would like to submit this form in the French, if you want this form to be converted into the French language, then you need to click on the French, and these things already we have seen, right? And if you click on the English, then this is converted into the English language. This is the internationalization. So here you can submit the form to the end user, right, by filling this form. But once you fill this form and click on this register button, then let me show you the controller class, how this flows goes. Basically, when you run this application, right, then this page is getting register.jsp is getting forwarded to the client, because you can see the URL is slash. So when you hit the home page of this application, then register.jsp is getting forwarded to the client, and that's why we are getting this page. Once the user fill this form and clicks on the register button, then register login success method is getting called, and this form data is basically getting populated into this model class, right? And we are making use of the binding results. If any data binding problems comes, then that gets stored into the binding results, and just we are querying the binding results by calling the hash error method. if some error, some data binding errors occurs, then just we are forwarding again. We are keeping user on the register.jsp page, and we are just displaying the error, whatever data binding error occurs, by specifying some tag on the JSP. So if I go to the register page, then here you can see we have used form colon errors and path equals to, we have given student dot star. So all error page will be displayed on the top of the JSP itself, right? So this application is pretty straightforward. Now question is that if when user submits this form, and while submitting this form, we are executing some business logic behind the scene, right, on the back end, and if some kind of exception arises, then what kind of page we are going to forward to the end user. So here to make this demo, what I'm going to do, I'm going to write some code snippet over here. So here what I'm going to do, I'm just extracting the student name from the student model class, and just I'm checking is empty, and from UI, from view page, we are not entering the username, and rest of the field we are going to enter. Then of course here we are expecting some kind of null pointer exception, right? So, and if this condition gets true, then I'm going to throw some exception. So I'm going to throw a runtime exception. Runtime exception, right? So let's see what happens in this case. If I run this, I could run this problem again, I could run this application again, and let me show you what kind of error message in that case we are getting on the view. And here if I have deployed, if I click over here, so we are getting this kind of error page, which is a container generated error page, and this seems to be not a user friendly error page, right? So that server has sent us HTTP status 500, and that is for the internal server error, and saying that request processing is failed, nested exception, and some kind of null pointer exception has arises. So we should not send this kind of server generated error page to the end user, because for a technical person is for a developer is easy to understand. For end user, who is the consumer of your application, you cannot send this kind of error page, right? So how to customize it? So come to the controller class, and here within the controller itself, I'm going to create an exception handler method. So let's go to the end of this controller. I'm going to create a controller class request handler method, and return type would be a string itself, and you can give the any name. I would say exception handler, and this guy is going to return us a JSP page, and that JSP page will have to keep in the view directory. So here I'm going to paste this JSP page. This one second, just a second. So this JSP page already I have created. So this JSP page I'm going to paste it over here. So something is called runtime exception.jsp, and if any kind of exception has occurred at runtime, so this JSP page we are going to forward to the client, and this would be the meaningful JSP page. This is the created by us, not by the container. And once you create this exception handler method, then this method has to annotate with @exception handler, and this takes an argument as a value, and value you will have to specify the exception type. So here I am going to specify runtime exception dot class. So if any runtime exception, when I say runtime exception, then runtime exception is the super class of all runtime exception. So any kind of runtime exception like array index out of bound exception, arithmetic exception, null pointer exception, any kind of exception arises, then this request then this exception handler method will be called, and runtime.jsp method is getting called. So, and you have a different request handler method. In any request handler method, if any runtime exception or its subclass exception is occurred, then this exception handler method is getting called, and runtime.jsp will be forwarded to the client, which just we have created. So let me show you. This is the page, which the JSP page which I have created. If some kind of problems occurs in our request handler method, then this page basically we are forwarding to the client instead of a container generated this page. So after doing this modification, let's run this project again. So let me run this project again. And last time just we have simulated this error. We haven't entered a student name on the JSP page. That's why this student get student name comes null, and we are just calling the isEmpty method on that, and because of that we got the null pointer exception, right? So now let's run this project again. Now let me open this project on the external browser, and at this time let's see what error page we get. Now I'm going to again click on the register page. Great. At this time we are getting our customized error page, right, saying that a student registration form, some problems has occurred, please contact to the website administrator at email as provided, like this, right? So I hope you enjoyed learning this video. And here what we have done, basically we have created a exception handler method within the controller itself. So this is called controller based exception handler method. We can define exception handler methods in our controller classes. All we need is to annotate these methods with @exception handler annotation. This annotation takes exception class as an argument. So if we have defined one of these for exception class, then all the exceptions thrown by our request handler method will be handled. These exception handler methods are just like other request handler methods, and we can build error response and respond with different error page. We can also send JSON error response that we will look into when we'll learn Spring MVC with RESTful web services. If there are multiple exception handler methods defined, then handler method that is closest to the exception class is used. For example, if you have a two handler method defined for IO exception and exception, and our request handler method throws IO exception, then handler method for IO exception will be executed. So that's all I have in this video tutorial, guys. So in next video we'll see how to define a global exception handler. So suppose if you define exception handler method like this within the controller, then this exception handler is basically accessible for this controller only my controller. But you have a different controller classes, then this will not be accessible for the other controller. And here we have a defined runtime exception, right? We have annotated as @exception handler, and here we have specified the runtime exception. But some kind of checked exception occurs at if some kind of checked exception occurs like IO exception or some kind of checked exception which is the subclasses of exception, then this is not going to handle. So again we will need to define a different exception handler method within this controller, and there we will have to provide the exception as the top class exception, that is nothing but the exception dot class, right? And if in that case if some kind of checked exception occurs, then that handler method will be called. But in that way we are just increasing the code duplication. So to get rid of code duplication, we'll have to define the global exception. Means we'll define a separate controller class which will work as a global exception handler, that we'll see in next video tutorial. This code I am going to put on the GitHub location. I will specify in the video description itself. If you have any query and question, then please do post the video. I will try to answer those queries. Thanks for watching this video.